What will happen to you or your parents when savings don't last a lifetime? What do you think it costs to stay in a nursing home? Can you apply for Medicaid long-term care and keep your home and other assets? Is there a way to plan ahead in case there's a serious long-term illness in your family? This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff with Hawaii News Now. Tonight's program is part 2 of a topic many of us have thought about either for ourselves or for our parents. What happens when you outlive your savings? Last week, we learned some unsettling truths about facing the day when you or a family member needs skilled nursing care and help with the very basics of daily life. Getting to that point may be a slow process, or everything could change in a second, triggered by an accident, a fall, or a stroke. We learned the average cost to live in one of Hawaii's skilled nursing or long-term care facilities is about $130,000 a year and rising. And most importantly, we learned decisions we make today have a critical impact on whether you or a loved one will be eligible for Medicaid long-term care coverage if you need it. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii's Facebook page. Now to our guests. Edie Maishiro is the Medical Assistance Program Officer with the Program and Policy Office at the State Department of Human Services MedQuest Division. Lori Adamczyk is an elder law attorney who developed her law practice as a result of her experiences as the primary caregiver for her late parents. John McDermott is the Hawaii State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. He was on the panel last week, and we're glad to see John back with us tonight. And Kaui Sartran is the Assistant Hospital Administrator for the Hilo Medical Center Extended Care Facility, part of Hawaii Health Systems, a state-run public entity. And now, Edie, if you mind if I start with you, what is the likelihood, how many people do we have in the state right now who are in this Medicaid long-term care program? And I know, John, you have some statistics as well about the people in private nursing homes. It gives, it doesn't have to be right down to the number, just kind of an idea of how many people are in it.
About 10,500 are in nursing home facilities, home and community-based care services, which is nursing home type care in the community.
So like the foster care homes?
Yes, correct.
And John, is there a lot of people in private care too?
Well, okay, so those numbers are for folks who are on Medicaid. Now, if you look at just the bed count, so we have right now 48 nursing homes, and we have 4,456 beds. But some of those people are on Medicare because they're getting therapy, they just were admitted from the hospital. Some of those people will be private pay for a while. Some of those folks might have long-term care insurance. So these numbers are different, you know. And I'm just giving the bed count.
The bed counts, right, of there's some vacancies involved.
Right.
But also, there's also the private pay people in the foster care home system.
Right. So one of the things that we had talked about at last week's show was that when you hear that it's $15,000 a month for somebody who's private pay, most of our residents don't say private pay for very long. So that is a little bit, you know, misleading, because you might think that, oh my gosh, 15,000, Halinani, 288 beds, you know, do the math, they're raking in the bucks. But the majority of their residents are probably on Medicaid, and so they're getting a fraction of that. So those folks who are in private pay are paying quite a large amount, because they're kind of subsidizing the folks who are on Medicaid, where the reimbursement is not as good.
So when we're talking about this, let's just ballpark it, you know, 15, 20,000 people are in long-term care now. That doesn't sound like a huge portion of the population, but as we were saying earlier, and Kaui Sartran, it's not something you can say, oh, it won't happen to me because it's a small percentage, right?
That's right. And, you know, like I said a little earlier, there may be a misperception that nursing home, you know, a large percentage is the elderly, when in fact it's not. I mean, it depends on the level of care that you require, and that you may end up, in fact, in a nursing home, and you may not be an elderly person. So, you know, it's really dependent on what level of care you're needing, and that will result in the need for Medicaid as well.
So let me throw this out. Lori Adamczyk, if you wouldn't mind dealing with this question. You deal with people who have made plans for their future, for their financial future, who get thrown into this system. What kind of options do they have in front of them when they find themselves facing a nursing home?
That's crisis planning, and that's when you have fewer options. Obviously, the sooner you can plan, the more options you're going to have. In crisis planning, we're looking at what's the financial snapshot? What kind of resources do they have available? Is it possible that there is an untapped Veterans Administration aid and attendance benefit that might be available to them if you've got a wartime vet or a surviving spouse of a wartime vet? Medicaid is certainly a resource that we look at, but then we're looking at the family as well. To what extent can the family participate in care?
You know, we got a lot of questions last week, some of which we got to, some of which we didn't, to show the great interest in this topic. And so, Edie Machero from MedQuest, one of the questions we got, fairly straightforward. What's the difference between Medicaid and MedQuest? And I would throw in and Medicare, because, you know, so the average person, they're looking at all these government programs. What are the main government programs that are out there?
So MedQuest is the agency or the division that administers Medicaid. So all the Medicaid programs, all the medical programs under the state are run by the MedQuest program. Medicare is it's under a different title under the Social Security Act, and that's also for, you know, age-bound and disabled people, but it's totally separate from Medicaid.
So when we talk about long-term care, it's Medicaid people are talking about when it comes to a government program that can step in and help you out.
Correct.
Correct, yes.
Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, and that's a huge misconception. A lot of people think that Medicare is going to cover them.
Only for a short time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And then, John McDermott, when people hit this need for a level of care, is it difficult to get into Medicaid?
Well, Medicaid is based on your financial need. And so if medically you need to be in a long-term care facility, and if financially you qualify, then it's not difficult. Although, I mean, I have heard some folks say that it has gotten a little bit harder. You know, the qualifications, the amount of paperwork that is now required is more complicated than, let's say, maybe 5 years ago, I guess. I have not done a Medicaid application in a long time, so.
Well, we could actually, I'll let you talk about this, Edie, in a bit, but just what you folks work people through the process. So do you, Edie, with the people who are at the table, working people through the process of either getting on Medicaid or arranging for whatever business model you're going to have, what's the experience in the current state?
Well, I mean, getting people hooked up to Medicaid, first of all, you know, it requires different steps. Some of the basic steps is, what is your citizenship, and do you even have that necessary documents to even file the application? And then moving forward, do you have access to, or if you're incapacitated, is there someone that's responsible or that's going to be your agent that has access to additional documents that's also needed? Because without all of these documents, the application is not going to be processed until completed. And that's part of the barrier is, you know, informing people, or that people need to be aware that you are going to be asked for these certain documents. I mean, that's a pretty set standard. You can't move forward without that. You'll need a United States citizenship. If not, there's other documents that can take that place. You need definitely bank statements if you have bank accounts. And if you're in the hospital, you're incapacitated, you need to make sure that there's someone that's going to be able to speak on your behalf. And recently, there's been a recent change, effective, I believe, December, that we used to be able to submit legal surrogacy, and they could be one of the authorized representatives, but that has since changed as well.
And that was a fairly new policy. We've always allowed people to apply on someone's behalf if you're incapacitated or you're a minor. That's in our federal statute. You still can do that today. As far as that surrogate issue, we had hoped to help by allowing a healthcare surrogate under there's no one else that can represent the person and so on to apply on behalf of a person, but because of there's legal ramifications, and so we have to go back to the table and maybe work with changing policy a little bit, maybe change our administrative rules, which we're working on. This is a kind of a hot topic right now.
Let me stop for a second, just so I understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is the ability to have somebody help you or make decisions for you. Is that what we're talking about?
So there's helping, and then there's actually signing on your behalf. And so for long-term care, for regular Medicaid, it's not so bad because most of the time they're able to submit what you need. And if you have a doctor's note, you can do that. You can process the Medicaid. It's when long-term care comes along. There are certain forms that must be completed by either the person or someone with legal authority to sign off on it. And those are federal requirements. And so that makes it difficult. So that's what this issue is about.
We're talking about a power of attorney.
Power of attorney.
Yeah, a completed power of attorney, which is why, one step that people can take ahead of time is get those legal documents done. Assign a trustworthy person to be your voice when you're not able to speak or on your own behalf.
Exactly.
And there's a different type of person you might want to assign to handling your financial affairs under a power of attorney than the person you might want to assign to handle your health care decisions under your advanced health care directive. But both of those people are critical to being able to carry out your wishes when you're suddenly laid up and you can't speak for yourself.
So, Edie, getting back to that question, what should people have lined up regardless of their condition, really regardless of their age? We talk about bank statements and so on. I mean, the average person, they might be piled in an envelope in the living room table.
And as far as Medicaid is concerned, we have a form that you can fill out at any time. It's an authorized rep. It assigns somebody. So if you do that at the beginning, you're perfectly fine, but then something happens to you, then you have it. And you have someone that can sign on your behalf, speak on your behalf. Right. The problem with that is, though, like Lori's bringing up, is that you don't have any authority to go to the bank and get someone's bank statement or get their financial records. And so if you're someone that becomes disabled or you're unable to speak for yourself, you need someone like a power of attorney that can go do that for you. And that way the whole process, it goes smoothly with your Medicaid application.
So I don't know if Medicaid has that on their website, but for instance, I'm a single person. I have no children. My sisters all live in New York. They don't know what my bank account is. I don't have these papers all in one place. I don't think that I'm ever going to get sick, but I could get hit by a car tonight. I could have a stroke, whatever. I end up in the hospital, and then they want to discharge me to a nursing home. The nursing home wants to know, well, who's signing him in? Because he just had a stroke, and he can't sign himself in, so who's giving permission for him to be there? The doctor wants to know, can I give him any treatment, medications?
If it's a new doctor, can I even see his medical records from somebody else?
Yeah, so I mean, everybody really has to do some preliminary prep work, but they don't know what it is. And that's why if Medicaid could develop like a checklist on their website, I don't know if it already exists, that here's what you should consider gathering together, and hopefully you'll never need it. But just in case you do, because my family, they're in another state, they don't know how things work in Hawaii, and we've never talked about this.
And
because,
even if they did, they'd have to fly over and go through your apartment and find all that because they're not even
And first
here.
they'd say, what a mess, So.
We tell people to get a accordion file and just start throwing copies of bank statements in there and keep going, and when you get to 5 years, take out the last year and just keep a separate file so that if the day ever comes, your family doesn't have to struggle, because bank statements have gotten to be so hard to get, even from the bank.
You mentioned 5 years. Why would you keep that many bank statements? I generally, I throw them away after a year.
Well, there's a 5-year look-back period that the Medicaid office is entitled to examine all of your financial transactions to determine if you're eligible. And so they generally from the get-go don't ask for 5 years, but they could ask for 5 years. And it's so much easier to just keep that in the file in anticipation than it is to have to dig around later.
What, Edie Marshall from Medicare, what's the purposes of five-year look back? What is?
It's a federal mandate. We have to go back 60 months to look at any transfer of assets, any assets that you have, any things that have happened, and so we're bound by federal law to do that.
But what's the rationale for it?
You're on Medicaid. You're applying for Medicaid because you really need it. You're really poor.
You're impoverished.
So you cannot have multiple properties and you gifted it. You gave it away to your son or daughter, and now all of a sudden, look at me, I'm poor. I'm poor. Well, you weren't poor a year ago. So where did that all go? So you shouldn't be eligible for Medicaid if you're kind of maybe hiding your assets in some way. It's supposed to be just for people who really need it, because we're all the ones who are paying for it.
So they're looking for any transactions that would look like they might have been done in contemplation of applying for Medicaid.
So that's, do you have folks that you've tried to help that ran into complications with that?
Well, when that happens, and there are some families that they do have multiple assets, multiple tax map key numbers, or and I actually don't advise either way. I always defer to the experts. I say, if you have assets, my advice is fill out the application. I always say exactly what Edie said. Fill out the application. Even though you think you don't qualify, it's okay. Let them tell you don't qualify. Let them advise you. And then, move forward from there. What I tell them not to do is don't start moving things around, because that could put you in a penalty period, and which is much more damaging.
Do a lot of people do that? Move stuff around in anticipation of this?
Sometimes people, they hear from their neighbor or somebody at church that, oh, you better get your property, put that in your daughter's name. And they start making ill-advised moves with their assets, and it ends up, backfiring on them.
How does, this is another question from a viewer, how does long-term care insurance work? How does it fit in, and is it sufficient for most people to take care of this issue? Anybody here
Read the fine print.
Yeah. Okay.
So, long-term care insurance is expensive because not enough people are doing it. More people did it, of course the price would come down. We had a phone call one time from a man who was trying to place his wife in a facility, and at that time there were no beds available in any nursing home. So he placed his wife in a community care family foster home, which is really a mini nursing home. It's no more than 3 beds. But when he tried to get the long-term care insurance company to pay for that, they said, oh, in your policy, you can only put her in a facility that's at least 10 beds. 3 beds doesn't count. Now, really, they should be focusing on the level of care, because if you're skilled or intermediate, that's the same in a nursing home, that's the same in a community care family foster home. And actually, that company would have been saving money, because again, a nursing home would have charged $15,000, a foster home maybe $6,000, I don't really know. And so they would have saved money, but they gave him a hard time, and luckily we were able to get that company to authorize payment. But he didn't know. And
was it anywhere near enough though, the payment, even if it was, because?
Well, it depends on, long-term care insurance covers multiple things. So I know some folks who are using long-term care insurance for assisted living, and it's paying everything. And one person I know, her plan even includes a guest for dinner. So that's a very good plan. But those were plans long time ago when almost nobody was paying for them, so they were much cheaper and much more generous. Now people live much longer, and so those plans keep evolving and changing, so you really have to read the fine print.
That's very true. The definitions that are used in those plans determine whether or not there's coverage. And a lot of people don't read the definitions, but the definition of a nursing home might have been, more
and it
than
may
10
have had
beds.
coverage, but a limited, a percentage of the cost.
What this also reminds me of is that Hawaii and every other state is unique. Not only in, yes, there's the federal system, but then each state has its own unique mix of facilities. Mm-hmm. Here in Hawaii, we've got particularly what strikes me as an unusual mix of facilities. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. And so what's out there for people when they reach the age where they can't take care of themselves so much?
Well, they have starting off with ARCH homes, which is basically they need minimal assistance.
So
These
ARCH
are-
is adult residential care home.
Yes, sorry, adult residential care home. And there's two different levels to the care homes. One where, you know, they pretty much need supervision, minimum assist, and then you have your expanded ARCH, which is like the care, like the nursing homes, but a smaller setting. And then we have
And they're all private, so they don't take Medicaid.
the
they-
expanded
There are a
ARCH
few, right?
is
Expanded
takes
They
Medicaid.
want to be private pay, but if you have an empty bed for a long time, then they don't take Medicaid, they take SSI.
Right.
Okay, you lost me in there somewhere.
Yeah, so our ARCHes are adult residential care homes.
These are
if-
not nursing home type.
These are
Homes in the community.
private homes. We have like 136
Those
in
big
Waipahu.
houses, yeah.
No, these are not the monster homes.
Oh,
A type 1 is 5 beds or less, so it's a regular house. A type 2, 6 beds or more. One of the largest type 2 used to be Pololo Chinese Home, but they've kind of phased out part of the care home and focused more on the nursing home. So they were the largest. But type 1, 5 beds or less. Type 2, 6 beds or more. And you're part of somebody's home, a family. You know, it's supposed to be almost like somebody's adopting you into their family. So if they go to church, they bring you if you want to. If they're going to the movies, they bring you as well. And so, you know, many people say, I don't want to be in an institution. I'd rather be in a regular home, in the regular neighborhood, and feel like I'm part of a family. But those homes, if they can, you know, their first choice is usually private pay. And they will sometimes take folks who are not private pay or who came in private pay but ran out of money. And so for a regular care home, Medicaid will not pay for a regular care home, so you'd have to apply for SSI. Expanded is different.
SSI is disability, Social Security.
Social
right?
Security.
So
insurance.
I just wanted to say though, we don't pay for the room and board, but we will pay the Medicaid expenses. We'll pay for you know, home and community-based services that you may need in a care home. It's just that they don't pay the actual room and board, but they pay for everything else.
Is that Medicaid long-term care you apply for to get that, or is that just regular Medicaid?
This is home. It's actually under long-term care, but it's home and community-based services. So you have to you have to qualify for them. So it's a type of long-term care.
But so you would apply for that when you need it, as opposed to just having Medicaid.
Correct.
Okay. So let me just throw out a couple of questions we got from viewers on this issue of power of attorney, because we got 2 questions right away when we started talking about powers of attorney. If you know someone in your family has a serious disease or is mentally incompetent, should you become their power of attorney, and how does one do that? The second question, if one wants to set up a power of attorney, can one use a form downloaded from the internet, or must one hire an attorney? And we'll ask the attorney in the room,
Yes.
Gloria Dempsey.
A power of attorney document is only as good as what it says. And so you might pull something off of the internet, but in a crisis situation, when the agent, the person you've empowered to act on your behalf, takes that document to the bank or to the long-term care facility and is ready to sign a contract, if it doesn't withstand legal review and it's not good enough to allow you to take care of that banking transaction or sign that contract, then you're going to be sorry that you did that. Generally speaking, as we get older, powers of attorney should get bigger. We tend to
Bigger, like cover more things?
cover more things. In middle age, we sign powers of attorney to give our children or our spouse or our sibling power just in case of emergency to take care of normal things, because we're not thinking about incapacity. But as we get older, into our 70s, maybe our 80s, incapacity becomes more of a risk. There should be more authority given to your agent to make the big decisions about placement into a facility if that's what you need, about home modifications to make your home safer if that's where you want to stay.
Let me go to this, back to Edie, and when we talked about powers of attorney or assigning someone to take care of you, it sounds like to get Medicaid long-term care, a power of attorney by itself doesn't mean that some person can fill out all these forms for you. You still have to be responsible to a certain degree, if
Right.
you can be.
Yeah, so some power of attorneys say it's only for healthcare decisions, so you might not be able to look like she was saying. So usually it has to be a durable power of attorney that covers everything, including applying for medical assistance, getting financial records, those kinds of things. But that's what we will accept that, but it has to pass a test, like Lori was saying.
So back to the original caller's question, how do you know that you've got a power of attorney that is doing all it needs to do?
Well, it's a good idea to review it every couple of years, especially as we get older, 3-4 years down the road. Bring that thing out, take a look at it, go see your attorney, have them review it, make sure that it's going to work for you.
You know, most people, though, they don't have an attorney. I mean, how do people who can't afford, people who are going on Medicaid, it's kind of hard to go hire an attorney. I mean, how are they supposed to get this kind of advice?
There are legal clinics, there are some places available that will, legal aid, that will help you with a lot of these basic kinds of documents.
Some of these questions also can be answered through the University of Hawaii Elder Law Program, Jim
Excellent.
Peach.
Yeah.
Although they're not going to do a power of attorney for you, but they can help you with that. And they may know some attorneys who might do it pro bono or reasonable. But your question was also, it said, if the person is already incapacitated.
That was one.
And that's too late. You cannot be
right.
signing any legal documents if the person is already incapacitated.
Oh, I see.
So that's
Right.
another reason why you have to plan these things ahead of time.
Well, they may be physically incapacitated, but mentally
Yeah,
still be
yeah.
cognitively good, and in that case, they could sign a power of attorney, but it's when cognition becomes an issue.
And the other issue about power of attorney is that it's usually a good idea to have maybe 2 people listed. You would still have a priority, who's number 1, but number 1 might die before you, or may not be available when you need that person because they're on a cruise around the world.
Or just might
so who's that
decline to
other
do it.
person? Yeah, they
Yeah.
can also decline. So, and I often have cases where a family member was never told, oh, I assigned you as my power of attorney. Well, thanks a lot. Now, what am I supposed to do? I didn't know you were going to do this. So you really want to make sure that the person that you're assigning is agreeing to do that.
Okay, so let me just sort of wrap up this segment of the show by reinforcing for people what stuff you should have around. Edie, why don't you start? What should people just sort of have around, assuming that we're not just talking about a handful of people going to nursing home? Something could happen to any of us at any time. How organized should we be? What should we have around just in case we do need sudden need for government assistance?
Yeah, and so especially if you're going to go, if you ever have to go down the long-term care path, as Lori was saying, you want to start saving any, your financial documents, but more importantly, you want to have someone that can speak on your behalf that knows everything in case you can't do it, because you never know what could happen to you, car accident, whatever. And so, although if they sign the authorized rep form that DHS has, that can help you apply for Medicaid. That can even help you sign the forms you need to sign for Medicaid. But where you will run into problems is when you need the financial assistance. If you go to the bank and you show them that form, they'll be like, we're not going to help you with this. So that's where the power of attorney point comes in. And it's hard to say everyone should get a power of attorney. I don't want to say that, but those are the type of things in the back of your mind if you're getting older, or maybe you have, a family history of certain things, you might want to just think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so just, we're talking about planning, but sometimes people don't plan, and we have a piece of video from last week's show that I'd like to refer you to. Last week, Mary Liz Riley shared her personal experience with us. It's one that we should all think about. Life suddenly is turned upside down, and you don't have the answers.
It was a devastating Father's Day weekend last year, and we were all out camping, got the call Mom had had an operation at Kaiser. That all went great. Went home and got a headache and fell asleep and had a stroke, massive. So when we found her 8 hours later, she was taken to Kaiser and lost mobility on the left-hand side, luckily not the right, as I've been told. And we were thrown into a quandrum of what to do. First, are we saving Mom's life? And now, how do we get her the care? Mom was a retired real estate agent, no cash on hand, mortgage, maintenance fee.
But she wasn't she wasn't destitute. She
No.
had a pretty normal situation for a retired person.
She had her Social Security, and it was just under $2,000 a month, which just covered her expenses. In fact, I bought all the food and stuff. So, yes, she had her asset, and she had a car, but no real income.
So she's in the hospital, she's had a stroke.
Yes.
She's debilitated.
Correct.
No way to bring her home.
No way.
So immediately,
It was like that. It was
what
like
did that feel like?
terror.
Okay, you folks have all dealt with people in this situation. Lori, in particular, her mom had some assets. She had something called a transfer of
Transfer and death deed.
Yeah, and I got a caller asking, what's a transfer and death deed? And apparently it caused some problems.
Well, a transfer on death deed is simply a deed that is signed in advance, which, the intent is that the title to that property in that deed is going to transfer upon your death to whoever you've designated. The problem is, though, that it looks like a constructive trust to the Medicaid office, and that's why it didn't pass muster.
You know, we got a lot of questions last week, and I think it's worth exploring again, because everybody's focused on the house. That's the highest value asset we have. Everybody's focused on the house. People feel that they have to get rid of their house because it's going to get taken, or they have to sell it and the kids won't get it. But it sounds like, from what we said last week, there's really not a whole heck of a lot you could do about that. Is that a fair thing to say, or are there ways you can make sure you keep your house if you end up going into Medicaid long-term care? Edie?
So I'm just going to say that if you do have a home and you need to go into long-term care, you have return rights, and so it's not like you have to sell it, but if you end up staying in long-term care and you don't go, we ever return home, the state puts a lien on it and they'll recoup what they actually paid for you. But if you have a spouse or a child that lives in the house, they're not going to make you sell your home. They can still stay there until sometime down the road where they are going to sell, and then the lien will still remain. So
they lien your house even if you have a spouse in the house?
they will put a lien on the home, but they will not act on the home. They will not act on the lien.
Until you pass away, or until you sell the home?
Or you can give the home to your spouse, and it's not a transfer of asset, which was what most people do.
So is it a misconception that your house is at risk if you're heading into Medicaid?
Well, yes, it is a misconception, because your home is actually an exempt asset, assuming it meets the requirement is the equity can't be more than $858,000 for this year, and every year it changes. If your equity is below that, that house is an exempt asset. So Medicaid won't touch it, but if Medicaid does then provide services, they're going to be seeking reimbursement for those services. Now, in essence, you're getting a good deal, because Medicaid is going to pay a discounted rate to the nursing homes. They're not going to pay that $12,000 to $15,000 that John was talking about. So even though there's a lien put on that house, that lien is going to be substantially less than what you would have paid private pay for the same services had you not qualified for Medicaid.
So if you qualify for Medicaid, does that still work for condos too, or is there some other? If it's
Any
a
home.
condo,
It's a home, any home,
Yeah.
condo, townhouse.
And there's an exception, and that is if you end up, if you know the end of your life is coming, and somebody puts you on home hospice, and you go home and die in your own home, there's no lien.
Kelly, what kind of experiences have you had with this part of the process? What kind of things do people say to you that indicate to you that this is a concept that's foreign to people?
Well, there's a lot of them, first of all, they're fearful because they feel that they're going to lose their home. And I think the belief is that, just as you said, well, we're going to put the lien on your home, but they sign that form that they do have an intent to return. Mm-hmm. However, my question is, they're all given a cost share. Everybody, well, most of them have cost shares. Mm-hmm. Now, if they keep current with their cost shares throughout the duration of their stay in long-term care, is that the purpose of the lien? Or does the lien have a separate purpose? Like, if they didn't pay their cost share, then in fact the state would act upon the lien.
So what it is it's very rare that your cost share is big enough that it covers the whole cost of the nursing facility. So
Sure.
even if you're paying, so say your income is $4,000 and your cost share is $3,000.
Tell me with the cost share. What's that term mean?
Cost share means share of the cost. So you're sharing in the cost
My share of the cost.
of the nursing home facility, of the care you receive there, because as you said, it's very expensive. And so say you do have a cost share of $3,000, that'll be subtracted from what they actually say how much Medicaid paid for you. So that will lower it even further.
So in other words, you pay what you can afford to pay, and then Medicaid pays the balance.
In most
And then
instances, it's less than $50. So they
Less
Yes,
$50.
less $50. So
They
whatever
let
your
you
remember
income
that,
is,
right.
$50 a month.
so that's your cost share.
Because we also hear that if your Social Security is over like sub-level, you're not going to be eligible for Medicaid. That's not true.
No, there's no
that's not true.
ceiling. Yeah, some states have a ceiling. Just to let you know that some states have a ceiling, maybe 300% of the FPL, and if you're
Federal
federal poverty level,
Okay,
correct.
right.
So if your income is above that, you couldn't even qualify for long-term care. But Hawaii is not like that.
Okay, so that's another misconception that's out there, possibly because it comes from other states.
Correct.
We talked a lot about what you should have on hand. What are some of the other? This is a question from a viewer specifically. Besides not ruining your Medicaid eligibility by putting things in a trust, are there other situations that one should avoid? We did talk about the transfer on death deed, which I think that they had to get rid of in order to be able to be eligible for Medicaid because they would put a lien on that house, right? So what other situations should people not do? I know this is complicated per person, but what other things should people not do that might actually jeopardize their ability to get Medicaid if they need it?
What I think would be beneficial is, first of all, I think that they should actually take a look at the application and what the questions actually entail.
So apply first. And then,
Well, it's available online. There's a list of, they ask specifically, do you have IRAs? Do you have stocks? Do you have money market? I mean,
Life
everything,
insurance?
life insurance.
And have you made gifts?
And jewelry. I mean, everything is listed there. So they're telling you, these are the things we're going to ask you. We want to know, do you have them? What is it worth? So take a look at these things. And then I would inquire with, okay, so if you have stocks and bonds, what does that mean? Talk to someone, get legal advice. Don't move it around. Because obviously, if they're asking about it, they're going to want to know what happened to it if you moved it around.
stocks and bonds, IRAs, those kind of things, they get counted in this?
Anything that has a liquid value. So stocks and bonds, you could sell it and make money from it, right? And so if you do move it around or you cash things and use it for yourself, you just have to be able to show, hey, I paid for my nursing facility, or I paid for this or that for
You're
myself.
not hiding the asset.
You're not hiding it. I'm using it for me to live. So, that's another misconception. You can do cash things out and spend it, but just make sure you keep a record of what you did with it.
And you do it for yourself.
Do it for yourself or your family, okay, I take that back. Do it for yourself in this case for long-term care. Yeah. And I did want to add a comment to that. Actually, applying for assistance is easier now. We have online, we can do it over the phone, and then of course we still have the paper apps, so it's become a lot more accessible. You can call in and actually do an application over the phone too with our outreach services.
Okay, so it sounds like don't move things around and don't put something on your assets that makes it so Medicaid doesn't have access to it if they need it for your cost share. Mm-hmm. Those are sort of the two big ones, right?
Don't hide anything.
Don't hide anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was
Simple
just going to
enough.
say
Go ahead,
also
John.
that, if you have so many assets that you're not going to qualify for Medicaid, but you need nursing care, skilled nursing or intermediate care, you will save money by going to a community care family foster home or going to an expanded care home. So, people should consider that as well. And those homes are all listed on the Department of Health website. So, you can see what's in your neighborhood, what would be easy for you to drive to visit, because you definitely want to be, monitoring the kind of care that's being provided. So
That's the question I would have, right, is that people have a tendency to look to institutions and trust institutions, whereas the house down the street run by that nice lady, you might not be so confident. I mean, can you be confident that this foster care home that you're comparing in price to a big facility, can you be confident that you're going to get an equivalent level of care?
If it's a licensed home, You
Right,
can be
exactly.
confident.
Yeah,
For the most part, yes. And there's case managers. The state requires that there be a case manager assigned to that home, to every patient, not assigned to the home, but assigned to the patient. And a fee is paid, and that case manager supervises the care plan and keeps an eye on what's happening with that patient.
Right, so if you're in a nursing home, you're being taken care of by 3 shifts. So, somebody's there for 8 hours and then maybe they have another job, but otherwise they go home and they recharge their batteries. But when you're in a foster home or you're in a care home, expanded care home, it's one person doing everything. And so in addition to the 3 shifts, she's cooking the food and she's taking people to the doctor and she's taking care of her own kids.
But
and maybe
most of
she
those,
has.
they're not allowed to leave anybody. People
Well,
alone,
you can
are they?
leave, but you have to have a substitute caregiver there.
Has to be a backup.
You cannot be left alone. So it's a lot of work, and it can be very stressful. And not every resident is a joy to be with, And so there are challenges. So the best thing that you can do is monitor. I mean, a red flag for me is if a home is insisting that you can only come on certain days, certain times, you must call in advance. Red flag, red flag, red flag.
Okay.
Why is that?
Okay, good points. Now, back to the trust issue really quick, because this sounds like a good question. If I have a trust, and I know there's different kinds of trusts, will I still qualify for Medicaid? Can I qualify when the trust runs out? Does that question make sense?
So your trust would have to be evaluated. If there's nothing in your trust, you don't have an asset, then there's nothing to count. Then you could be eligible.
How would there be nothing in your trust?
Because it could some people just set up a trust for future use, maybe to put a home in or whatever. And the other way, they had maybe bank accounts in there and they spent it all. Now you have no trust, it has no value. But it all depends on the language, so it's possible.
Are there trusts, Lori, at Abject, where it wouldn't be a problem for Medicaid, other than if there's no asset in it?
Trust. Well, let me back up.
Because there's a lot of kinds of trusts.
There's a lot of kinds of trusts, and trusts generally, people create trusts often in middle age for perfectly legitimate purposes, never thinking about incapacity and never thinking that at some point down the road they're going to need to qualify for Medicaid. You don't create a trust in order to, hide something from Medicaid. It's just ill-advised.
You do it to be prepared for probate for when you die.
You do it because you want to manage an asset. You want to protect it for a minor child who's a beneficiary. There's a lot of different reasons. When you're later in life, suddenly you've run out of money and Medicaid has become a possibility, it's important to realize that if you want that government assistance, that asset has to be taken out of that trust. The reason for that is because the Medicaid office wants to be able to be reimbursed through that lien, and the only way that can happen is if that house goes through the probate process. It can't go through probate if it's in a trust.
All of these things, I'm actually getting a better feeling about it now. As I've started to understand the rationale. It's taken me a little while. But the impression, though, that people have is that it is getting harder. It's getting harder to qualify, or there's new rules, or, what about that perception, Edie, Maeshiro from MedQuest, what about that impression that it's getting harder and the suspicion people have that, it's because the government doesn't, wants to keep its money, or they're afraid there's going to be big cuts in the future? I mean, what is actually happening that's giving people that impression, do you think?
I think it's just a misconception in general that we don't want people to qualify for Medicaid for whatever reason, that we don't want to give this assistance. But honestly, we're there to help the people. We want them to have assistance. If you are eligible, even if you have assets or income, always let us look at it. Generally, if you have a house and a trust, you're not going to be eligible. But I mean, you could have a lot of income, you could still be eligible. So we always say, please apply. Please apply. Let the experts, let our workers look at it, let us review it and see what happens. The worst thing that can happen, you get denied because you're excess assets or excess income. But the best thing is you're approved. So that's what we say to everybody.
And then also, it's not an end, right? Once you might be ineligible at the beginning, but it's highly likely you're going to be eligible before long if this goes on for very long.
Exactly.
I was actually struck, though, last week when we talked about how short most stays are in long-term care.
When I started around 1990, residents generally, when they entered a nursing home, it was kind of a long-term stay. And now the focus really is on rehabilitation, try to get people in and out within really the 20 days that Medicare is paying 100%. For one thing, you don't have to deal with on the 21st day, how are we going to get the part now that Medicare is no longer covering? So does this resident have assets? Would they apply for Medicaid? Would they be eligible for Medicaid? So all of that guesswork is eliminated if you can get them out within 20 days. The other thing is that the longer people stay in a nursing home, the more comfortable they sometimes get. And also the family, because now I'm not getting up in the middle of the night to change him. The house doesn't smell anymore. Life is much easier visiting him rather than taking care of him.
I'm going to throw out a question really quick, because this is a really interesting question. And I don't know if it's a fair question, but I'm going to ask it out of respect for our viewers. And by the way, folks, we've got so many questions here. I'm trying to get to them all. I'm trying not to, I can't read them all because there's so many, but they are fueling my questions. Surely some other more civilized nation than the U.S. has figured out a more humane solution to this problem than what we're hearing here. Is it a sense among you folks that this is a draconian or bad system that we have?
No.
I think, you know, we as a community can actually work harder, maybe, in getting this information out. I think the biggest barrier.
It's about information?
I believe so. I believe that the biggest barrier to getting people to qualify for Medicaid is that they just don't know. They don't know where to begin. They don't know. I mean, you know, you talked about, well, what should they have? First and foremost, you should have at least your vital records, copies of your vital records on hand all the time.
But this system, though, that we're talking about, going into a nursing home or something, are we worse at it than other places?
Actually, I think Hawaii's better in a sense because we have a lot of these community care foster homes. So instead of having to go to a nursing facility, there's many homes. We always try to get more, so it's more like a family. They like John was saying, and we encourage that. Those are our home and community-based services program, and I think the number's on our website. But they offer so many services, and that's the closest thing to actually staying in your own house. And you can actually stay in your own house.
So that was the next question.
Yeah, you can. You can get home and community-based services at home. So you don't have to go to a foster home.
Even at an intermediate level of care, like if you need a lot of care, you can still stay home somehow?
So if you qualify for long-term care, but you don't want to be in the facility and you're able to go home. So there's a point system, but if you're assessed, you can go home and get home and community-based services. You're considered long-term care, but you can be in your own home and get the services you need so you can stay home and be in the community.
Are we seeing more people succeeding with that?
Well, there is a major difference, I mean, I have to say, with the amount of care that they'll get. Basically,
If they're at home, you mean?
If they're at home, minimum of about 2 hours a day. And it's not always 7 days a week. And it really, really depends on what is your level. You know, the goal would be is if you had a family member, that family member can be a paid caregiver. Exactly. But, you know, there's a lot of these families, everybody works, and the amount that the caregiver would make, you know, it's not enough for them to sustain themselves.
Well, that's why I think family involvement is so critical. It's really, it can be a huge asset for people. Getting the family to sit down and work out a plan ahead of time, a contingency plan. What are we going to do if? Dividing up jobs. Everybody can contribute. Often it falls on one person. Usually the women step up before the men. And one person can't do it all. If everybody was to, you know, take a share of the burden, makes it a lot easier. And having the conversation ahead of time is really important.
The system which you're making reference to, I mean, in the last program we talked about the support services that you can get through Kapuna Care, through the, each county has their Office on Aging, and they all have an Aging and Disability Resource Center. And so we're far ahead of the mainland in terms of support services to keep people out of institutions, keep them home as long as possible because that's what they want. And that saves us taxpayers as well because people do eventually end up on Medicaid if they're in long-term care. So it's a win-win all around. So I would say that Hawaii is, you know, ahead of the curve. Now, if you're comparing us to other countries, Canada or places where they have, universal health care, that's totally different story.
Yeah, it's a whole other show.
Yeah, that's another.
We've been talking a lot about people who are, middle class or lower income or slightly above middle class and this whole thing. We're getting also questions from people who I think may have a little more choice about this. Like one question, they're asking about places like the Plaza, places that promise to take care of you for life after you make a lump sum payment. Is there a catch, is the question there. Rental versus purchase of lifetime care housing. What are the recommendations about those sorts of things? Is that something basically if you have a lot of money and you're healthy, you can look into some of those things? Is that?
There are 17 assisted living facilities. All of them are private pay, except Oceanside on the North Shore, which used to be called the Ponds at Punaluu. They accept Medicaid, and I think Hawai'i Retirement might accept Medicaid. The rest of them pretty much private pay. But they're all very different. You really should go and see for yourself. Chapter 90 is the administrative rules for assisted living, and all of the administrative rules are on the DOH website. And so you can see what they're required to provide for you.
Is that what does that mean?
Assisted living, well, it depends on which assisted living facility you go to. So if you're at like Kahalanui, okay, they have a independent living part, and then maybe you start needing some care, so you can be moved to the assisted living part, and then maybe you continue to decline, and they have a nursing home part, and they also have I think they have a secured unit for memory care unit, yeah. So so they're all a little bit different. The plazas, there's I think 5 plazas.
Just to the rest of the panel, we don't have a lot more time left. Really quick on those. Most of those request so much up front that you'd probably have to sell your house.
No. The plazas are month to month.
Oh, okay.
Lots of different types of places, and even though it seems awfully expensive, if for somebody who's middle income, but they have a house, maybe they're cash poor, but they're house rich, the house can be leveraged to help pay for that. Reverse mortgages are definitely an option.
So there's nothing wrong with that as a model?
No, I mean, they are expensive. There are other states like Washington and Oregon that provide similar services at a fraction of the cost, and they do accept Medicaid recipients. Hawaii doesn't do that. Down the road, these models may not be sustainable because after you've sold the house to live at a place like that, you're not passing that house on to your kids. And also our seniors, a lot of them have pensions, but the millennials are taking jobs that don't offer pensions, so that income is going to disappear.
I've got a couple really quick questions. We've only got a couple minutes left, so just really quickly, what happens to a condo that is in 3 people's names? Can I still qualify for Medicaid?
Is that your home?
I imagine it is, but
so it's going to be the same, treated the same, but your 1/3 is the part that they'd be looking at. So if it's your home, we would exempt it, but we would put a lien on it.
But can it be an investment?
On your portion only.
Can it be an investment? You have to live there.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Trust for your grandma, I think this is getting kind of specific, and we've only got about a minute left. All we've said about this, it sounds like, and just tell me if I'm wrong, is that keep your stuff in order, keep your documents, get a power of attorney or some other document that expressly says who can help you. But other than that, is there any other one thing that you suggest people should do to look ahead to this? And I really only got
people think this will never happen to me. Change that attitude. This will happen to you.
And have the conversation.
Yeah.
Start planning.
Have those
early.
conversations.
There are tools, but the tools are available before you have the crisis.
Yeah.
And they aren't going to be available when you're in the middle of a crisis.
And navigate through the resources that we have available. I mean, we have, ADRC, we have resource centers. Visit them, learn about them.
And when the time comes, is there time to do this navigation, some of it, or are you pretty much going to be just caught in the winds of this moment?
People call me all the time. That's part of what the Ombudsman does. So, folks can always do that. And again, go to the ADRC, because they can also steer you in the right direction.
And then when you do apply for Medicaid, you have the right to ask for an interview and sit down with the worker, and they can explain it to you step by step so you understand. And if you have your interview and you have to come back, you can do that too. So we're here to help you as well.
That's an important message, because I think people
Yes.
think of the government as being, we take the paper in, we look at it, we kick it back.
We
It's
wanna
not like that?
help. No.
Is that your guys' experience too? Is that they're able to do that? They have the resources?
If they have everything that they need to process it, we usually don't have any problems. It's getting what they need.
Okay, well, we are done for this hour. Thank you all so much. We now, Edie Miyashiro from MedQuest has provided the link information to websites that will help people learn more about Medicaid long-term care. We have those on the screen now, but don't run out and get a pencil. It's all on the website. You could go find them at pbshawaii.org. Along with both programs on this topic, you can replay them off the web. Good information all in one place, the PBS Hawaii website. Mahalo to our viewers for joining us, and to our special thanks to our guests for sharing their knowledge and experience. Edie Miyashiro with the State Department of Human Services MedQuest Division. Thank you. John McDermott, once again, the Hawaii State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Lori Adamczyk with the elder law practice of Rulon and Adamczyk and Kawi Sartran from the Hilo Medical Center's Extended Care Facility. Next week on Insights, another important subject facing Hawaii and other coastal communities around the world. In late December, the State Climate Commission accepted the first major study on Hawaii's vulnerability to rising sea levels. Our guest panel of well-informed experts on this topic will discuss the concerns and recommendations from this report, and of course, they will answer your questions and comments. What can we do to mitigate sea level rise in Hawaii? That's next week. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.